Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs. Hi, I'm Gordon Burkell from Filmmaker U. At Filmmaker U, we create film courses to deepen and diversify your existing skill set. You can learn more at filmmakeru.com, or of course follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. Each week we interview a film professional to discuss their work, and this week I'm joined by Dan Briceno, whose work includes Vikings, Halo, and the upcoming Billy the Kid series. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Pleasure to be here.
Now, you started in reality television over at Insight Productions, and I know so many people who, they work to get their foot in the door, and then they want to go, you get in, and then you go to where you want to go in the industry. So you seem to have moved over to fiction television. How did you make that transition?
Yeah, I graduated, and I just graduated college from film school, and all I wanted to do was just get in, find a way to get in any way possible. My name got thrown around to do reality, and I worked my butt off trying to do whatever I could. And that kind of work paid off in that I went from just being a trainee to then becoming an assistant. And I guess people saw that work ethic, and a producer had a connection at Showtime. They were going to start doing the Tudors, and they needed assistants because they wanted to do post in Toronto. And it was basically through that hard work in reality that they suggested that I come in as a second assistant editor. And for me, that was a dream because I wanted to lean into drama. And so I was very fortunate to make the right connections at the right time and jump into that and then climb the ladder from there.
Wow. So now you've worked on Halo, which is a huge franchise game.
Yes.
Did you play the game before you got
here?
I
mean, once I did the interviews with the showrunners and I got the job, I dove into the whole Halo verse and, played all the games. We bought an Xbox, played all the games, and watched insane amounts of YouTube videos talking about the lore and all the deep stories that are in the game. And I didn't read any of the books, but it was quite an intense process. Although once we got to making the show, it was very clear that we were going to have the foundations of what was in the games, but we were going to do our own thing once we got going.
So did you feel pressure then when you started working on the show from the fan base, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think when you're dealing with an IP that's been around for 20 years or more, and they haven't really made a big series or a big movie. They've made some movies for web series type things for the games as advertisements, but it was huge pressure. This is a show that's been talked about for many years, and it's always stalled in production or pre-production, I should say, and this was happening, and this was real, and so. Yeah, we felt I think everyone in each department felt a lot of pressure, and they wanted to honor the games in some way, but at the same time, we wanted to do our own thing, and take it in our own way. And the makers of the game were involved, and there were executive producers along the way, and they were great. And they gave us a lot of freedom to do what we wanted to do and to take it to where we wanted to take it.
Now, how do you like to start your cuts? So like if you're starting something like Halo, the footage is coming in, some editors I talk to, they just start placing everything in the timeline and sort of chipping it down. Some like to build their select reels. How do you like to approach your cut when you first get the footage?
Yeah, definitely. I like to watch everything. And then from there, I'm making either, it depends. It's every scene is different. If it's an action sequence, I may start making selects right away. If it's a dramatic character building kind of scene, I may be taking notes on things that I saw that I kind of want to focus on. I've already made notes prior to going into the scene of things that I'm looking for, or things that I may want to take a certain direction, pieces of the scene that I want that seem like a turning point. And so every scene is a little bit different, but definitely a select reel is always something that I have. And usually the starting block for any of my scenes.
Interesting. And now, in Halo, was there a particular scene that was difficult for you to tackle that you were really proud of the outcome?
Sure, tons of them. I mean, we're dealing with you're dealing with a lot of blue screens, a lot of things that are not there, characters that are not there, or people walking on stilts and pretending to be an alien or a different kind of creature. Things are happening that you don't necessarily see until the VFX are going to be there, and we don't always have all the previs. So the whole show was such an incredible experience. I had worked on Vikings, and I thought I had done a lot of work with visual effects. Based on that, not at all. This was something completely on the other side of the scale, and it was such a great learning experience. And you really have to have an imagination and a lot of information going into the cut so that you're able to build it in a way that when you present it to the director, it's right along the lines of where it needs to be, so that when it gets to the VFX team, it makes sense and it works. The rhythm works, and the rhythm works within the things that you can't see. So it's a lot of work, and it's very intense, but it's an amazing experience for sure.
I like to picture your interview. They're like, "Hey, you've handled VFX before." Like, yeah, don't worry about it. VFX. And you're like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, VFX, no problem. And then you get your first bin, and then you see, oh, okay, this is. Don't tell anybody. Yeah.
Now, how do you talked about things not being there and dealing with rhythm? How do you do that in a scene if there's characters aren't there or creatures aren't there, and you have to build an action scene or a scene where there's a lot of timing needed?
Yeah, I mean, I think you approach it the same as you approach any scene. It's just that now you have to take into consideration that the performance is maybe happening in your head rather than on screen, and you have to really rely on every other scene that you've cut in the past, and move that into it. And I think that the rhythms get established. There was, for example, a scene with this character has been taken by the Covenant, that she's a prisoner of the Covenant, or not so much a prisoner, but she's been kidnapped, and she's been part of the Covenant, and she's talking to the prophets, which is an alien species. And on set, we just had their heads as puppets. They didn't really move their mouths or anything, and they barely moved. And so we didn't even have dialogue for some of these, and they're supposed to be speaking an alien language and saying Healy. And so I would just look at the script of what it was supposed to kind of say, and I would start, speaking for them and kind of, I mean, if somebody walked into my room and saw me talking to the screen and recording these crazy things, they would have questioned whether I should keep going in the production. But it's such a new experience, but it really is like cutting any other scene. It's just you have to put in your imagination, you have to put in extra work. You may have to create your own dialogue so that you can shape it and then go from there. And it proved to be very valuable. I mean, it carried us all the way through.
Now, you're currently working on Billy the Kid.
Yes.
So you're going from millions of years in the future to the Wild West.
That's right.
Were you a fan of Wild West films before?
I mean, I think we all have influences in Westerns that, I mean, I think cinema has a stamp on Westerns that is carried through to every filmmaker. And I think Westerns are very intriguing because the themes that you get to play with. But what we wanted to do with Billy the Kid is we wanted to make it like a pre-Western and have it be a little bit more intimate. And we start with Billy as a kid. I an actual kid, not just Billy
Mhm.
the Kid. And we get to play around with the foundations of what made Billy the Kid in the beginning of the series, and kind of make it a more intimate process than what you're used to in a Western, where you're maybe full of wides and and you're selling the West. Here we're kind of introducing that. So it's what does the West look like before the West was formed? And it was wonderful to jump from, like you say, 500 years in the future to the beginning of the Old West. But I think with every series that I've worked with, there's the themes, and it's the themes and the characters that really carry you through. So I don't really have to worry about, oh, I'm in the future, I'm in the past. It's what are these characters experiencing, and how can I help the audience get to where we want to get them to go.
Now, if I'm not mistaken, Billy the Kid, or someone released a book of Billy the Kid back right around his time, like when he was close to death.
Yes.
That sort of told his lore. Did you guys use that as your blueprint, or what was the?
I mean, I think Michael Hurst is the show who's wrote the whole series and also wrote Vikings. Is just such a student of history. Mm-hmm. So 100% we looked into all aspects of Billy the Kid's story and different aspects that formed who he is. So we 100% looked at that, and but there were so many just different articles and and even studying all the other different stories that have been. I mean, it's something that's been told many times. So what was going to make this different from all of those?
Interesting. So did you guys? Because one of the things that's I guess controversial about those books is some people believe that they sort of made it more grandiose than his actual life.
Yes.
And is that sort of touched on in this, or is that?
Yeah, I think you get to see why someone would think it would be a bigger thing, where maybe as for Billy, it was just survival.
Yeah. And
so, but it's nice to pay homage to those kind of things, like, you know, seeing somebody react to it in a way that they don't understand.
Yeah.
What was behind Billy's decision, but we as an audience, we know because we've been with him this whole time, and we know what it meant to him, and we know that to him it was survival, and it was just trying to make a life out here, and it seemed impossible for him. It just seemed, among many other things, that he was just an unlucky person in the West who managed to survive.
Yeah, made his own luck.
Exactly.
Yeah. You mentioned that, like, you know, it's about the themes and sort of the story elements, you know, whether it's 500 years in the future or Billy the Kid's era. So what do you look for in stories that attracts you to them?
Well, I think number one, it's character. I mean, I think very early in my career, I was taught that character is number one. It carries the story, and it's those character arcs that really audiences get attached to, and you can help tell the story through characters. So to me, is what are these characters going through? What are they feeling right now, and where are they going to go? To me, it's that right. When I'm reading a script, I want to, if I can feel attached to a character, I get very excited, and those are the kind of stories that I want to tell. It's when a character has something interesting in their lives, whether it be like in Halo, where it's, you know, Master Chief is this, basically, he was a child who was kidnapped and made into essentially a weapon. What is it like for him to find his humanity again after doing what he's done for, you know, this, after all his military service, and what does that look like? And to me, that's very intriguing to dive into.
So it's very interesting, because then I think about Billy the Kid, and like they're both similar, having like their youths taken from them.
Yeah. Well, you know, one of them gets to grow up very late into their lives, and in Master Chief, and in Billy, there's somebody who has to grow up very quickly, and experiencing things that are maybe quite new in the world, anywhere in the world. the building of the West and the new laws and what essentially become part of American culture. He's all experiencing it for the very first time and at a very young age. So two very different sides, but it's super interesting. We all have a story to tell, and to me, that's where everything lies.
Now, when you talked about getting the scripts and what attracts you in the scripts, do you mark up your scripts, and if so, how? Because like I've talked to some editors and they put feeling notes in the sides, and I've talked to others who might note issues that they might see coming. How do you like to mark up your scripts?
Yeah, I'm like a deep note taker. So you'll see in my desktop on the desktop that I'm using to edit, I'll have a folder that's got all the scenes. I have notes for every scene that I've taken when I read the scripts initially, and then once again right before I head into cutting the scene. And so I don't necessarily have notes on the script, but I have notes on every scene, and whether it be issues that I see that could and possible solutions. You never know exactly what you're going to get, because sometimes you get a scene and you're going, oh, this is not even how I envisioned this going. And so this is so interesting. And now you have all these new ideas, but you're also incorporating things from the tone meeting and from your own ideas that you had when you were reading the script. So to me, marking the script, having notes on this, on every scene, to me is important. As much as information I have where people want to take something, helps me to build something new to give to the director and the producers.
I guess to jump back to Halo for a second, we talk about post-production being the last rewrite. Was there any changes in Halo that it happened in post that you were maybe came from your notes or came from ideas in post that the story?
Definitely. I don't think there's ever been a show where there hasn't been a change in the edit room.
Yeah.
It's essential. It is really the place where the last draft is created of this script. And for an example of Halo is we went through, it's a production that took about almost 3 years. And of course, that being extended by the pandemic, but there was a point in which episode 2 had been locked for 1.5 years. And then the showrunner sat down to look at the episode for color. And we went back into the edit room after it being locked for 1.5 years, because we were going to change the story arc of a couple of characters, and the way that we were going to get into it was different. So we went back, then restored some things to script order and some things back to the other way. So it ended up being a combination of the things that we had done in the past and the things that the script already had. So after 1.5 years, we unlocked and we went back into the edit room, and we kind of rewrote it again a little bit.
That must have been frustrating from one sense, because you're like, oh, I'm done, good. Right.
But, it's so funny because you go through the process, and everyone, especially at the beginning of a production, everyone's got so many opinions on how it should be, and they feel very strongly about that. And then 1.5 years later, so much time away from it, somebody goes, maybe we should change it around. And at first I thought, well, that's crazy. We got here through a specific process. So no one's going to agree to this. And everybody was like, no, yeah, let's take a look at it. Let's change it. And I was like, oh my God. That, in the end, it did make it better. Yeah. So that tells you, like, even when you're done, you're never done. And that's the thing. Every editor knows that once you're finished, you're never finished. You could always keep going. You could always keep improving it. And that's, it's always hard for me to watch a cut that I've done when it airs, because I'm like, oh, I wish I would have done that. Oh, I wish I just got this new idea for this. Too late.
You have to say though that's pretty impressive for the studio or the showrunners to be like, you know what, let's go back in. I know this is going to be
but
like that's really impressive, because it's like, let's make the best product or
Yeah,
show.
and you love, at first you're like, what? But then it's great. I mean, the abilities that we had to go back into this cut in this series was unlike anything else. Probably because the VFX, were always coming in and you were making refinements, even if it was just a frame here or a frame there. But it was unlike anything else, for sure.
Now, I have one last question for you. We've been stuck in this pandemic for quite a while. A lot of people turn to streaming services when they get quarantined or stuck inside. Is there a show or movie you discovered on streaming services over the last year that people should check out?
Discovered. Well, I know that I caught up on Succession, which I hadn't started. And of course, that's a masterpiece. Something new that I watched that maybe a lot of people haven't watched is a UK series called Landscapers with Olivia Colman. And I think they did a very creative job of telling a story. And I thoroughly enjoyed the performances, and I would recommend that to anybody.
Well, thank you so much for letting me interview you this week.
No, thanks for having me.
And that's it for this week. Make sure to check out filmmakeru.com for all our latest courses. And of course, follow us on Twitter at filmmaker_u. I'm Gordon Burkell. Thanks for watching. Today's episode of Filmmaker U is brought to you by our sponsors, OWC. Go to owcdigital.com for all your filmmaking and computer needs. And it's also brought to you by our other sponsors, AJA. Make sure to check out aja.com so that you can see how they can help you in your post-production needs.